Donated some of your time to us here on this Sunday. A couple of weeks ago, in fact, a couple of months back, we had some guests here on the program that we focused on heroin addiction and how Attorney General Mike DeWine has called it an epidemic here in the state of Ohio. This all kind of coordinated with the untimely death of Philip Seymour Hoffman, Hollywood actor, and really brought to the forefront the problems that not only are we facing as a country, but also here in the state of Ohio. And as early as the last 2 weeks, state of Ohio, John Kasich, Governor Kasich, also Mike DeWine, Senator Rob Portman, and a number of individuals from around the state, including schools representing the 88 districts around the state of Ohio, meeting down in Columbus to address this issue, which is becoming more and more of a problem, not only for adults, but for our young people. 13 ABC Action News reporter Melissa Veitch tackled this issue specific to young people and getting help a few weeks ago. Listen.
Stephanie and Derek are both recovering heroin addicts. Both in their early 20s, both started using drugs and alcohol at an early age.
I started drinking in high school.
I picked up the first drink at 16.
Eventually, it led to smoking weed.
It just progressed out of curiosity, to smoke weed.
Both Stephanie and Derek are going through outpatient rehab at the Glen Bay Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center. Their counselor, Jim, says younger heroin addicts are seeking treatment in numbers he has not seen before. 5 years ago, he'd see 1 out of every 50 clients. Now,
out of a group of 12, 2 to 8 are heroin addicts.
And the younger addicts like Derek and Stephanie are getting their start with pot.
They will graduate. Eventually, the marijuana won't do it.
Curiosity for pills.
Here's pills. Try this.
That lifestyle is introducing you to people who have these other substances, and then you try it. And then you like it better than the marijuana, and you keep trying stuff till you get to the heroin.
I found out heroin was cheaper.
I couldn't find pills anymore, and somebody said, I can find heroin.
Then the vicious cycle of addiction sets in, and if they're lucky enough, the chance to get clean, if they're lucky.
Just strictly using it, heroin is probably the quickest death it is out there.
Once again, 13 ABC Action News reporter Melissa Veitch there with that story. I have invited onto the roundtable some of those guests who were down in Columbus a few weeks ago to hear the message that was being delivered. A hard one to hear. Superintendents, both Jim Fritz and Tom Hosler, representing Perrysburg and Anthony Wayne School District. Amy Barrett, representing the Awake Organization, Executive Director. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. I said kind of a hard to hear message. Was it that case down in Columbus, Tom?
It was eye-opening. The face of heroin is changing, and the folks that are supplying the drugs are really targeting the suburban areas, students and families that have money, and that's, I think, the most shocking thing I came away with.
One of the things, and I reached out to some other districts, obviously representing Perrysburg and Anthony Wayne here this afternoon. I reached out to Brad Rieger, superintendent of Sylvania Schools, and you bring up the suburban side of this, and I asked him via email. He wasn't able to join us today, but I said, why is it unfair that suburban districts get tabbed over the urban districts as being prone to these heroin-related issues? And he said definitely unfair, and he targeted because of money issues. And you and I were talking about that before we came out here today. Do you agree unfair?
I think what we see is we in suburban areas have people and resources and that are available, and I think what we see is our drug dealers that are coming into our suburban areas to provide a product to them. It's very unfortunate. I agree with Mr. Hosler that when we went to the program, what we heard in Columbus was that this is a suburban issue as well as an urban issue, but primarily in the suburban area there is more money available, and what we see is access.
With that said, though, I was going to point out, time and time again, it's told to me, people go get heroin because it is cheaper. Is that a relative term? I mean, or is it just becoming less and less expensive?
I think what we hear is that it's cheaper than what they're trying to find elsewhere as far as prescription drugs and or marijuana. We're hearing that drug dealers are willing to drive the heroin to the door or deliver it right directly to the person who wants to purchase it. It's becoming more accessible to the youth in our communities.
As I continued on with Dr. Rieger, I said, how many students, Sylvania students, have been suspended, disciplined for a heroin-related issue? He said none. And I said, is heroin use among students a focus of the Sylvania schools? And he said yes, along with all substance abuse issues. Amy, you hear this from districts. I'm going to ask that question to both of you in just a second. But Amy, you talk about your organization, Awake, and we were discussing how it is a proactive move, whether it be you're a parent. I do this story again and again because it scares the heck out of me with 3 kids at home.
Absolutely. We are trying to be on the preventative side of things before we do bring it into our schools. And I would be correct to say we haven't seen it in our district either as far as heroin use goes, but it tends to start with maybe the alcohol, the prescription drugs, the marijuana, and it progresses from there. So we are really trying hard to bring to our community members and our parents and teachers and whatnot that preventative message.
And we heard that from the piece that Melissa did with the 2 individuals who said, yes, it started with drinking, yes, it started with pot, yes, it went to pills, couldn't get pills. What did you take away? Walk me through getting the message out to schools down in Columbus a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, government getting involved. We'll talk more about that on the other side of our commercial break. But when you see this being addressed, obviously it's being noticed around the state. It's
Correct.
a big issue.
Correct. And so we are trying to bring that message that we all learned back to our parents and our community members through social media is a big avenue, letting them know the resources that we have in our communities to prevent it from getting to the heroin use.
How have you gotten that message out since? I mean, have you sent out Facebook messages?
Facebook messages, Twitter messages.
What did you say in those?
Email campaign. One of the ladies that spoke was a mom of a boy who took 1 pill one time, Danielle Smoot and Cole's Warriors. And that message hit home. It hit to me a little harder because I don't think parents understand that it can be a one-time thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be an addiction, so to speak.
Yeah. I reached out to Sheriff Mark Vasilish in Wood County, Tom, and I know the answer because he said they have not had to address any issues with students either dealing or being busted for using heroin. Perrysburg schools, any issues with heroin use?
Not specifically with heroin, but I think schools in general are ground zero because, like you were just saying, it's this road you begin. You start off with the alcohol, which leads to marijuana, and then the prescription medication abuse. That's really a huge concern because what we're hearing are students and younger adults, 20-year-olds, are using these pills. They're in cabinets at home, they're in grandma, grandpa's house, and then they begin to use those, get hooked, and then a cheaper alternative is heroin.
Correct.
So we understand that while heroin isn't necessarily pushing into the schools, that those kinds of things, we are ground zero. We're the first line of defense, and we need to step up to do something.
I would say the same, and piggyback on Tom, it is pushing into our communities. I mean, we have in the Anthony Wayne area, which is a rather large area, we have had several arrests related to that, and it's on our doorstep. So the more preventative message we can bring into our students, they'll carry that forward. We have begun working with the Lucas County Sheriff's Department and A Renewed Mind to provide that education piece to the officers who then take it.
Right. And I know Sheriff Tharp, I was just going to say, he has, I know
We've
he's
been working with Sheriff Tharp and representatives from A Renewed Mind to provide some resources to families as a preventative message. And we also provide, I know Tom says they have them in their area, we have 3 in our area, the prescription med drop boxes where people can get rid of those pills. They don't have to hang on to them.
And I know Sheriff Tharp has met with his deputies, even had education moments where they are trying to tell them what to look out for. Jim, you were going to say.
Yeah, I think that one of the messages we obviously heard when we were in Columbus was that in the Cleveland area, in the Columbus area, Cincinnati area, they're seeing a lot more use than we are currently. And some of that use has led to students and or recent graduates passing away from that use, their addiction. And so our hope is that we can get the message out about the seriousness of this issue to our parents, to our students, to our communities, and so that they're aware that heroin will be an issue.
You know, if we can go online real quick, my director, Brian Mahalik, if we can take just a Google page, a news item, police arrest a man tied to 9 heroin overdoses last month. That coming to you, the first story here on this Thursday when we're taping. Mitch McConnell out of Kentucky saying heroin is a cancer in that state. You had mentioned when you walked away from the Columbus, and we want to show a piece here in just a little bit, talking about a 20-year-old, a beautiful 20-year-old girl called Marin's story. In fact, I understand we have a little bit of that. And I just want to show you, take a moment to listen and watch some of this. We apologize, no sound behind this, but essentially 20-year-old Marin from Pickerington, very active in sports, active in her school. She got addicted to heroin, and unfortunately, that addiction led to death. Jim, John Kasich, Governor Kasich, was quoted as, and even people were saying, watching him watch this, they noticed he was emotionally affected by watching this. Same for you?
Yes, definitely. I think listening to her mother speak to us in regards to
She was
her
there at the
struggle,
conference?
yes, and she spoke to us and spoke about the struggle that her daughter had, that, you know, this was the average everyday young adult in the community and at school, and the way that they found out that she was addicted to heroin, the unfortunate story that she went through with us was very touching and very emotional. But I think it sheds light on the fact that...
How did it, can you share with our audience, how did it start for her?
Her situation apparently started with an issue where she maybe made some poor choices with some friends, which then led to the utilization of the heroin. They mentioned the fact that they started to notice that there were spoons missing from their silverware. They started to notice that money was starting to be missing in the home, which then led to a significant amount of money being lost, and then they understood after talking with her that this was an addiction problem to heroin.
Yeah, they had even moved to try to get her into a new situation, but the addiction moved with them.
Yeah, you know, she went through her story of her journal where she talked about her addiction and how she loved heroin and how addictive it was. And she was trying to say in her journal that she was trying to fight it. And unfortunately, she lost that battle.
One of the things you brought up to me as we continue here on the roundtable this afternoon, one of the things you brought up to me was the delivery, the pizza delivery thing that stuck with you. Explain that.
One of the comments that was made during the conference was that heroin's cheaper than ordering a pizza. And kids are able to make that connection through different avenues and have it actually delivered to their home. So that reference was made in describing this issue that we face.
Tom, the other thing is, and we talk about suburbs over urban districts being picked as far as ground zero, as you put it, but these dealers feel safer going to these kids in the suburbs. That's sobering.
Sure. They did. The State Attorney General DeWine talked about it as a business model.
Yes.
That they look at this, the folks that are in business to promote drug abuse, the drug dealers, the drug cartels, they want to go where it's safe, where there's money, where there's customers, kids aren't carrying guns, and the neighborhoods are, you know, they're not going to get robbed while driving to deliver that, as Dr. Fritz said. So. It is something that was startling, and Governor Kasich made a comment that his daughters go to a private school, and they had lost a recent graduate to heroin. So the model is not just a school issue, but it is really a community issue. And I think one of the things that they're trying to do with this program is get people talking about it, because if we just rely on the schools or your agency to do that, then we're going to lose. And you need the parents and the ministers and the coaches and everyone beginning to talk, because I know they said 50% of, you can reduce drug usage by 50% just by talking.
Just by talking.
And when Marin's mom was talking, were they in a state of denial? Did she say they were in a state of denial and that's what kept them from really getting involved?
I don't think it was an issue of them being involved. They didn't know. And an issue of denial is a good point. I think that her story brings light to it can happen to anyone.
She looks like a model student.
I think the perception is,
Yeah.
and she was in the story. She was a star athlete. She was a star student, beautiful girl as you see in the pictures. And so that I think her story brings light and hopefully impacts a lot of community members and parents that it can happen to anyone. It can happen in anyone's home. It's not about being bad parents. And then getting that help once you realize, I think a lot of times too, that's a big issue, is people being willing to step outside and ask for help. We're all concerned about what that looks like in the community and sometimes I think afraid to ask for help.
We're talking heroin addiction, especially among our young and here in the schools in Northwest Ohio. We've got to take a commercial break. We'll be right back right after this.